is now time to go in-depth this Wednesday afternoon. Several cities in the Sunshine State are celebrating a big victory. They have finally settled with British Petroleum after the 2010 spill that dumped millions of gallons of oil into the Gulf. Baynews 9's Al Rochelle sat down with one of the attorneys involved in the BP oil spill settlement to talk about how much money the Bay Area is getting and whether officials believe it's a fair deal.
Joining me right now is Steve Yarrett, an attorney who's been involved with the BP oil spill, offered to help the state with a settlement, wanted to have a $2 billion settlement years ago, and guess what? This settlement we got is now about $2 billion. So, I mean, whatever. Let's talk about this. Number one, why was there a gag order? Because when we first found out about it, we wanted to talk about you, and they said, nope, can't talk. Why?
Well, the settlement process required critical mass. In other words, in order to approach BP, it was imperative that as many of the governmental entities as possible be included in the settlement.
Right.
If BP was going to get rid of a headache of litigation, they wanted to get rid of the majority of the headache, not just pieces of it. So I think that the federal judge imposed the gag order is a little bit strong, a confidentiality order, so that there wouldn't be competitive, well, wait a minute, they're getting this, we want this. They're getting, and you know that. Anyone in the workplace realizes
in large order, do you think the cities were treated fairly? Did they kind of get what they, well, they didn't get what they demanded, but were they treated fairly? And I think that's a tough word to say, but.
I think it came out in a fair manner. I really do. When you look at anything like this, Al, the problem that most people would have, well, if you ask for this, why are you taking less? Well, there's a lot of factors that go into why you take less in a settlement. One of the things would be risk. Proving the actual damages with a stringent and very, very active opposition would be difficult. BP is not lacking for money or resources. Two, time. How much time do you spend litigating a cause? I mean, every American knows that the courtrooms can be very, very disappointing because it takes so long.
Right.
So the Exxon Valdez, an acquaintance of mine, had that case for 24 years.
Oh.
It's not something I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But the length of time of the litigation, the cost of the litigation, the wear and tear, and of course in the political environment, the changing circumstances of who's in charge, which mayor, which city council. We see that with the stadium, you know, depending on who's on the city council, that may have a direct effect on the outcome. So the risk, the certainty of a settlement, that is, you can go in and lose, and also the fact that we're not talking about, I think someone described this as a puny amount of money. To the city of Tampa, $27 million and change is not puny.
Exactly right.
No.
This was very, very complicated because when cities had to decide what they were going to ask for, there were certain categories that were affected, whether tourism dollars were affected, whether it would affect you in the future, how much oil got on your beaches. I mean, this is one of these things that's so complicated, maybe a little bit like the tobacco settlement, which you were involved in. So we had two cities that decided they're not going to take part in the settlement. Treasure Island wanted $10 million. St. Pete wanted $20 million. What's going to happen? St. Pete Beach wanted $20 million. What's going to happen to them now? Because they rejected it, right?
Well, they did. As a matter of fact, it's my understanding they're the only two municipalities in Florida, in the state of Florida, that did reject the settlement. The settlement, let's understand, was done by a neutral panel which recommended a formula. The formula took into account a lot of considerations. That was then presented to the various city governments and county governments. They had the opt-in or opt-out decision. I think it's significant that all but two opted in because of the factors I talked about. What's going to happen to them, of course, is a very, very good question, and one which the attorneys are going to have to answer in their city councils, because included in the neutral panel recommendations and in the orders of the federal judge, Judge Barbier in New Orleans, and I quote, "The court was further advised today that the neutrals have withdrawn their recommendation for any local entity that did not accept the neutrals' proposal as of this date." So now it looks like they're going to go it alone. And if the worst case scenario occurs and BP bows up, they're going to have to compose some pretty good legal talent to go against BP and its lawyers. And it could take forever. Now, I think they're counting on BP's desire to get this resolved. What may be considered would be BP's reluctance to get it resolved on holdouts. They may want to they may want to teach a very stern lesson.
Oh gosh. Now there's another study that came out. You helped in this study, provide some of the financing. And the bottom line is any reasonable person would have said you can't have that much oil going into the Gulf and that much dispersant. By the way, we don't know what the chemical makeup of that dispersant is without something happened somewhere. This study that showed some of these sand patties that were made up not so much of the oil but the dispersants. So this is going to affect us in the future, even though in quotes no oil technically reached Pinellas County beaches.
Well, this is an ecological issue more than a monetary issue in terms of revenue. The settlement dealt with revenues and lost revenues,
right,
and that was a little bit different. What that did, more importantly, was it fingerprinted the oil. Oil is a natural occurring component. So what the dispersant did was, much like the O.J. Simpson trial with the DNA evidence, the dispersant put a man-made ingredient in the component. So when we saw the patties here, Dr. Stevens and his very talented group at USF were very, very good at going through all the methodologies to ensure that this was an exact match on the patty samples that were taken from the Panhandle Beach, which we know came from the BP spill.
Right.
Once that was done, the significance was not so much the amount, I think it was rather minuscule, frankly.
Yeah, sure.
But the fact that it traveled so far, as you pointed out, great point, that it traveled so far tells us that the representations made by BP were not accurate. You remember the days, right? It's a small spill. It wasn't a small spill. It was the largest in the history of our mankind. It was a spill that was going to be easily controlled. What was it, almost 3 months before it was capped? It was a spill that would be minor in volume. They gave us minuscule volumes amount, but the volumes amounts that we got later proved to be mammoth.
But overall, the takeaway from this, BP was a big company. In reality, if you had to give BP a scorecard, I know this is tough to do, on a scale of A through F in terms of the way they responded to it, not the culpability, because I think everybody knows it's your well, you're culpable, your people were involved. What would you give them?
F. In terms of the response to the spill, F. They should have had an ability to do remedial actions that was effective, that was meaningful, and would have capped that well. F. The fact that 11 men lost their lives because it was mismanaged. F. What I would give them is probably a B plus in being good corporate citizens, because after they were proven wrong, they had two choices. One choice was to litigate until hell froze over, or to do the right thing and try to make good on the damage that was done.
Right.
And that's something that I think Exxon Valdez showed us. You can go have the corporate litigation last for 2 decades plus, or you can have a corporate citizen that takes responsibility, even though reluctantly. So the response to the spill, unsatisfactory.
Horrible.
Now, the good news, if they truly did learn, we're not going to have a repeat performance.
Yeah.